Welcome to this edition of Ethical Sustainable Investment News and Analysis to Profit By. I'm Ron Robbins, an ethical investing pioneer for over 40 years, quoted in the Wall Street Journal, MarketWatch, the Globe and Mail, and numerous other media, and founder of the highly respected global ethical sustainable investing information website, Investing for the Soul. And please listen to my disclaimer statement at the end of this podcast. Now enjoy this podcast. Hello, Ron Robbins here. Welcome to podcast episode 60, published on June 18th, titled Best Infrastructure and LGBTQ Friendly Stocks Plus, and presented by Investing for the Soul. Investingforthesoul.com is your site for vital global, ethical, and sustainable investing news, commentary, information, and resources. Remember that you can find a full transcript, links to content, including stock symbols, quotes, and bonus material at this episode's podcast page located at investingforthesoul.com/podcasts. Now, just a reminder, I do not evaluate any of the stocks or funds mentioned in this podcast. Furthermore, if you're concerned about the ESG, sustainability, or financial ratings of any stock or fund included in this podcast, check with your broker's online site for such information. If your broker doesn't have ESG sustainability information, sign up for free with Morningstar and you can gain access to such company and fund ratings. Please note, I receive no compensation from Morningstar or anyone else covered in these podcasts. Also, if any terms are unfamiliar to you, simply Google them. Now, amid the continuing U.S. talks on infrastructure, Neha Shamaria has penned an article titled 5 Potential Winners from Biden's Infrastructure Plan. It appeared on Fool.com. I name her picks and follow them with some of her remarks. 1. Vulcan Materials. Vulcan is the nation's, that's the US, largest producer of aggregates, operates across 20 states, and has equal exposure to private, residential and non-residential, construction and public infrastructure markets, positioning it well to benefit from nearly all kinds of construction activity. Vulcan is already experiencing strong demand and has a strong balance sheet and has steadily increased its dividend for years. 2. Caterpillar might be the leading construction equipment manufacturer, but it also has significant exposure to volatile sectors like mining and oil and natural gas. That's why a pure-play equipment stock like United Rentals could be a better potential winner from Biden's infrastructure plan. United Rentals is the world's largest heavy equipment rental company. Its revenue grew at a compound annual rate of 14% over the past decade. 3 is AECOM. Building anything requires planning, designing, and engineering, which is why an infrastructure consulting company like AECOM should benefit from an uptick in infrastructure spending in the US. Government is already its biggest client. 4. Nucor is the largest and most diversified manufacturer of steel and steel products in the US, and is North America's largest scrap recycler. Its mini steel mills use electric arc furnaces, a more flexible, cost-effective method than traditional blast furnaces. Also, Nucor has a solid balance sheet, increasing its dividend payouts for 48 straight years. 5. ChargePoint Technologies. The U.S. President's infrastructure plan includes a network of 500,000 EV chargers across the nation by 2030. Currently, there are only around 42,500 charging locations in the U.S. ChargePoint operates one of the world's largest EV charging networks and has a nearly 70% share of the domestic Level 2 charging network market. ChargePoint sells hardware to station operators, which then subscribe to its software to manage the stations." End quotes. More and more ethical and sustainable investors are turning their attention to green bonds and the benefits they offer. Here are 2 articles on that theme. The first is titled, "How Eco-Conscious is Your Portfolio?" 2 Green Bond ETFs to Consider, by Tezkan Jezkil at investor.com. Here are some quotes from the article. 1. iShares Global Green Bond ETF. The iShares Global Green Bond ETF provides access to global investment-grade green bonds that have been issued to fund environmental projects. Furthermore, the fund is US dollar hedged. Since its inception in November 2018, net assets have grown to $212 million. The iShares Global Green Bond ETF tracks the returns of the Bloomberg Barclays MSCI Global Green Bond Select US dollar hedged index. It has bonds issued by governments of France, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Italy, as well as the European Investment Bank and KfW Group lead the names in the roster. 2. Van Eck Vector's Green Bond ETF. Another green bond ETF that could be of interest to readers is the Van Eck Vector's Green Bond ETF, which provides exposure to US dollar-denominated green bonds for financing environmentally friendly projects. In addition to bonds issued in the US and various European countries, Van Eck Vector's Green Bond ETF also holds bonds from China, South Korea, Brazil, India, Chile, Indonesia, and others." End quote. The second article on green bonds is titled, $1.2 trillion U.S. Giant Launches Core Impact Bond Fund into UCITS Market. It's by Chris Slowly and was on the citywireselector.com site. The fund is for investors domiciled in Denmark, Netherlands, Switzerland, Germany, UK, and Italy. Here are some quotes. Global investment giant Nuveen has launched its Global Core Impact Bond Fund for UCITS investors to capitalize on opportunities created by ESG leaders. The multi-currency bond fund will invest across all global fixed income markets. Focusing on perceived ESG leaders, the bond fund will find companies setting an example in their respective industry or sector with respect to ESG risks and behaviors. The fund may allocate up to 40% in emerging markets and 15% in high yield at the manager's discretion. It will launch with $25 million, that's 20.5 million euros, of seed capital. End quotes. Since this is Pride Month and numerous LGBTQI+ investors are ethically and sustainably oriented, here's an article for members of that community. It's titled, Ethical Investing for Pride Month, 10 Gay-Friendly Stocks to Buy. It's by John Cesar and was on the GoBankingRates.com site. Here are some quotes from his article. 1. Alphabet Inc. Google, now trading under parent company Alphabet, has long been a strong supporter of the LGBTQ community. The company has a specific support group for the LGBTQ community known as Gigglers. 2. International Business Machines Corp. IBM. IBM was one of the first companies to include sexual orientation in its non-discrimination policy back in 1984. The company established its global LGBT council designed to make the workplace safe for everyone in 1995. 3 is Visa Inc. Visa has appeared on the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index for 5 years running, marking it as one of the best places to work for LGBTQ employees. Visa supports the United Nations standards for LGBTI, which outlines 5 standards of conduct that the business community can use to combat discrimination against lesbian, bi, gay, trans, and intersex people. 4. The Charles Schwab Corporation. Schwab has received a 100% rating on the Human Rights Campaign's Corporate Equality Index for LGBTQ+ inclusion for over 15 years. Internally, Schwab has created a diversity and inclusion group known as Pride, dedicated specifically to the LGBTQ+ network at Schwab. 5. The Coca-Cola Company. The company has scored 100% on the HRC's Corporate Equality Index every year since 2006. Coca-Cola has also designed a separate business resource group specifically to address LGBTA issues. Other LGBTQ-focused resources that Coca-Cola supports include the Gay and Lesbian Victory Fund and the Trevor Project. 6. PayPal Holdings, Inc. PayPal is another company scoring a perfect 100% on the Human Rights Campaign's Equality Index, and it strongly promotes LGBTQ rights. The company has a benefits flyer that outlines all its health benefits for transgender employees, from hormone replacement therapies and voice modification surgery to therapy sessions and more. 7. Microsoft Corporation. Microsoft and its employees have donated over $2 million to organizations supporting the LGBTQI+ community just over the past year. Microsoft has received a perfect 100% score on the HRC's Equality Index for 13 years running. 8. Target Corporation. As with many of the other companies making the HRC Equality Index, Target has signed the Equality Act. Target has developed its own Pride Manifesto, designed to emphasize the company's dedication to equality. Target also produces clothing and other products indicating its backing of the LGBTQ community. 9. Starbucks Corporation. In addition to receiving a perfect 100% score on the HRC's Equality Index for 11 straight years, the company has recently donated $50,000 through the Lavender Rights Project. 10. Apple Inc. Apple isn't just the largest company in America, is also one of the most consistent supporters of the LGBTQ community. Apple has been rated a best place to work for the LGBT community for 15 years straight. End quotes. Also, note this article on a new Pride Fund titled Pride Month Meets Wall Street as New LGBTQ ETF Hits the Markets by Ernestine Su. Quote, Procure AM, in partnership with LGBTQ Loyalty Holdings, launched the new LGBTQ 100 ESG ETF. End quote. Now for some honorable mentions. 1. Title, My Top Renewable Energy Stock to Buy in June. Quote, Bloom Energy is the stock I think will be one of the hydrogen winners, says Travis Hoyam, the article's author. It appeared on Fool.com. 2. Fidelity to launch 5 new ESG funds by Bernice Napier. Quoting the article, all 5 new funds are actively managed and the 2 ETFs are Fidelity's first ETFs focused on ESG factors. End quote. Well, these are my top news stories with their stock and fund tips for this podcast. Best infrastructure and LGBTQ friendly stocks. Plus, to get all the links, stock symbols, or to read the transcript of this podcast and more, go to investingforthesoul.com/podcast and scroll down to this episode. Also, be sure to click the like and subscribe buttons in iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you download or listen to this podcast. And please click the share buttons to share this podcast with your friends and family. Let's promote a better post-COVID world through ethical and sustainable investing. Contact me if you have any questions. Stay well and engage with your ethical and sustainable values and investments. Thank you for listening. Talk to you next on July 2nd. Bye for now. Learn how to create a simple portfolio reflecting your personal values by taking my 1-hour tutorial. Go to investingforthesoul.com/podcasts and click the link in the right-hand column for my DIY Ethical Sustainable Investing Pays tutorial. Now, I'll mention in the podcast if I have any direct interest or holdings in companies or securities I'm talking about. Furthermore, any news, opinions, analysis, or other information offered by myself, as well as references and information to or from other external sources in this podcast, is provided as general market information and should not be relied upon and thus does not constitute investment advice. Investors should consult their own licensed investment professional before making investments. Also, I will not accept liability for any loss or damage, including without limitation any loss of profit, which may arise directly or indirectly from use of or reliance on information in this podcast. Do contact me at ronr@investingforthesoul.com. Signing off, this is Ron Robbins.